Hey, everybody. Welcome back to yet another episode of the Legends of Sport podcast presented by Fujifilm. I'm your host, Andy Bernstein. Folks, I'm really excited about this interview. You know, I'm really excited about every interview that we bring to all of you. Our guest this week is sports columnist and author Mike Sielski. Mike and I first met when I interviewed him about his terrific book about Kobe Bryant called The Rise. His book and my Mamba Mentality book were perfect complements to each other. A few years ago, Mike and I did a great panel together on the court of the gym where Kobe honed his game as a teenager near Lower Merion outside of Philadelphia. That was a really fun event and a great chance to get to know Mike. So I was thrilled when I saw that he had released a new book called Magic in the Air, The Myth, the Mystery, and the Soul of the Slam Dunk. Cover photo by the legendary and iconic Neil Leifer, my mentor. Mike is an incredible researcher, which I believe contributes to him being a great writer. I love this book and hope you'll all order it. It's a must-have for any hoops fan and for any sports fan in general. We covered a lot of territory on this conversation. I love connecting with Mike again on another one of his fascinating books. So, folks, enjoy this conversation with the great Mike Sielski, and as always, I'll see you on the backside. So welcome, Mike Sielski, to the Legends of Sport podcast presented by Fujifilm. Mike, so great to have you back on the show, man. We chopped it up. Remember when your book came out, the great book you did about Kobe called The Rise? That was a few years ago. And never an excuse to get you back on the podcast, but this book, my friend, this is a great excuse to get you on the podcast. It's a fantastic book. So welcome, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing great, Andy. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to see you, and looking forward to our chat.
Yeah, me too, man. So, Mike, let's go back into the genesis of this book. So, you know, the slam dunk, this book is all about the history of the slam dunk. It's a deep dive into the history, being the incredible researcher and reporter that you are at your core, and then the incredible author, of course. What got you interested in actually doing this book?
Great question. So after The Rise came out and was starting to get read, I was hunting around for another idea.
Mm-hmm.
And I was trying to brainstorm with my agent, you know, what do you think will sell? What do you want to do? That kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And a friend of mine, whose name you might know, Tyler Kepner, who's been covering Major League Baseball for the New York Times and for The Athletic for close to 30 years, came out with a book called K, A History of Baseball in 10 Pitches. And he did and executed what I thought was a genius idea. He basically wrote a history of baseball through the prism of each of the pitches that a pitcher throws. So chapter 1 was the fastball, and it was basically kind of a history of the fastball, but he's got anecdote after anecdote and so much deep reporting and so many great stories about fastball pitchers, and, you know, from Walter Johnson to all the guys who throw 100 miles an hour today.
Yeah.
And then chapter 2 was the curveball, chapter 3 is the knuckleball, and so on.
Yeah.
And I loved that book, and I thought his idea, his method, his vessel of telling the story was great. And I thought, is there a similar way for me to tell the story of basketball? And the more I thought about the seminal moments in the sport and the really important figures in the sport, the more it came to me that so many of them were defined by their ability to go above the rim and dunk, whether you were talking about MJ, Dr. J, Wilt and Bill Russell. All these seminal figures played above the rim and were dunking. That was kind of part of what defined them as superstars in the NBA and in basketball as a whole. And then I thought about the fact that the slam dunk was banned in college and high school basketball from 1967 through 1976. And I don't know if you feel this way, Andy, but there are certain facts that we read all the time in news stories or posts on the internet, and they're just kind of glossed over.
Mm-hmm.
It's like there's a one sentence explanation for why this thing happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt that way about the dunk ban. I always heard, well, it was the Lou Alcindor rule,
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't want to shatter backboards. And I started thinking, like, well, wait a minute. Like, somebody had to make this decision.
Mm-hmm.
And how did they come to this decision, and why, and what was really going on? And that really hooked me, because I thought that historical fact could take a book about the slam dunk from 350 pages of YouTube highlights
Mm-hmm.
to a deeper exploration of how basketball and how America really have changed over time because of this one act on the court, because of the dunk.
Yeah. Well, being the ace reporter that you are, it sounded like it was very intriguing to go deep, 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 which you did. Lot to unpack here, Mike, and I want to cover as much as we can. I actually want to go back to the beginning of the invention of the game by Dr. Naismith. And you have a great quote from Dr. Naismith in the book where he says, quote, "If I had known how high you guys could jump to dunk the ball, I'd have nailed the peach basket higher." I love that quote.
Well, you know what it does, Andy? It drives home the fact,
Yeah.
and people forget this, because the fact that a hoop is 10 feet above the floor
Yeah, that's
is
fascinating. Tell me that.
it's the defining characteristic of basketball,
Right.
right? You can put however many people you want in the arena.
Mm-hmm.
You can put a court anywhere you want. Put it in this, in the neighborhood park. Put it in the middle of a city. Put it in the middle of a country field.
Mm-hmm.
The basket had better be 10 feet off the ground.
Right, but Mike,
And yet,
I know you're going to go with this, and I'm going to jump in. But it was an arbitrary
exactly.
height. That blew me away. There was like 4 or 5 things in this book that, like, I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It wasn't like Naismith planned for it to
Right.
be 10 feet high. It just so happened that at Springfield College, when he was working there, trying to come up with something
Yeah.
for all these unruly male students to occupy themselves, that there was a hoop 10 feet off the ground on the wall in like the indoor facility.
Yeah.
And there it is. And he gets the idea, and boom, it's 10 feet. And from that, we have, more than a century of history
Mm-hmm.
of the sport,
Yeah.
of the people who have made it great, people who have made it famous. So yeah, that's one of my favorite facts in the book too.
Oh, it's great. And then of course fast forward to the 36 Olympics in Berlin, and Dr. Naismith is there, and I want to get into that in a second, but I love that the book opened, literally the first sentence of the book, homage is a photograph. That's just me being, the photographer at heart.
I thought you might like that.
Yeah, and then of course later on in the book you pay homage to my great friend, mentor, and one of the heads of the Mount Rushmore of sports photography, Walter Yost, and the iconic MJ photo, which I want to talk about too. But the thing that struck me the most, Mike, when I started reading the book was your your just desire to find out who was the first. I mean, you spend a lot of time, like maybe the first third of the book is trying to uncover, as a great reporter that you are, who is credited with the first dunk, right? And you point out, I mean, I didn't even know Jackie Robinson played basketball, quite honestly. Mm-hmm. But you talk about Joe Ingles, you talk about Bernard Dabbas, Joe Fortenberry. Tell me about that process and how fascinating that might have been for you as a reporter.
It was the kind of thing that can drive you crazy when you're doing research and reporting.
Yeah.
Because you just feel like you're teetering, you're stepping on the edge of a rabbit hole. That if I don't conclusively say who the first person to dunk in a basketball game was, then there's going to be something incomplete about this book. And as you suggested, I spent a ton of time trying to confirm exactly who the first person to dunk in a game was. And I finally, after going down so many different paths and doing all kinds of archival research and looking on newspapers.com, which is an amazing resource, I'm typing in basketball and dunking and seeing how far back it'll go in the archives.
Yeah.
I finally just kind of concluded, I'm never really going to be able to know. And that's okay. And the point of the book is not to confirm who the first person to dunk was. It's just to establish the fact that it was not immediately thought of as being part of the sport,
Mm-hmm.
that it actually took someone doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And who that person was, it may have been, Inglis, it may have been Barney Dabbs, it may have been it wasn't Jackie Robinson, it may have been somebody even before that, but just paying homage to those early trendsetters
Mm-hmm.
and trailblazers within the sport, the people who thought creatively, was enough for me. And
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to follow that trail down some interesting paths. I mean, the shortest chapter in the book is the one about this guy Barney Dabbs from California,
Right.
who as a college player is kind of credited with dunking the ball,
Mm-hmm.
and it just takes me into this incredible story about him clubbing a mountain lion to death on a hike.
It's crazy. Yeah.
It's crazy, but it's one of those stories where, like, I came across it and I thought to myself, I have to include this in the book. I can't not have this story in the book. And so, to a certain degree, I'm like scratching my own itch
Sure.
in that regard. So it was fun. It was honestly a ton of fun to research all of that.
Yeah. I mean, you must at some point thought, there's just no way I'll know who, but you give us as the reader all this history that I had never even heard of, quite honestly. It's just amazing. I love the fact that you have a chapter that's titled, I think it's called Glandular Giants. Is that right?
Glandular Goons.
Glandular Goons. And somebody called them Glandular Giants, that like they were somehow like superheroes that are abusing the game by dunking the basketball, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that
crazy.
that chapter focuses on a guy named Bob Kurland, who
Right.
is credited with being the first player to dunk the ball in a college game.
Uh-huh.
And Bob was a great player
Mm-hmm.
for what is now known as Oklahoma State in the mid-1940s. And that chapter was important to me, Andy, for a very specific reason. Number one, obviously, Bob Kurland credited with being the first college player to dunk in a game. So I want to explore his story and tell that story. But the thing that really fascinated me about him was, he was 6'10", 6'11" tall. He was a redhead. He was very insecure about his height, about the color of his hair, and the stereotypes that went into it in the late 1940s about being a redhead.
Mm-hmm.
And he was made fun of because he was so big and because he could dunk. And you start with a guy like that, with Bob Kurland, for whom dunking is another sign that he is different, that he is not like everybody else. It's another point of insecurity for him.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you get from a guy like that to a guy like Julius Erving or Michael Jordan or David Thompson, whose sense of cool, who is regarded by the entire American sport watching society as cool because he can dunk?
Yeah.
The dunk becomes a symbol of Black style and coolness in America in the 70s and into the 80s and 90s. So I wanted to take the reader on that journey from a guy like Bob Kurland, who like wants to cower in the corner, but he's too big because he's 6'10" and hide from everybody because he can dunk, to the exact opposite of that.
Yeah, I'm glad you went there with that, because it's on my list to talk about. Actually was regarding the ban that you spoke about earlier in '67, which was 9 years, right? It was a 9-year ban. Unbelievable. Yep. In college basketball and high school, I guess, right?
Yes, correct.
But not in the NBA at the time, right? So that's a whole other conversation. But I guess the dunk, from what you say and from a lot of quotes in the book, the dunk was kind of viewed as like a street move. It's from the Black culture. It's from the playgrounds. It's even called in the materials I got about your book a form of rebellion, right? I mean, there's a quote in the blurb about the book that says, quote, "A righteous slam dunk could mirror the righteousness of the civil rights movement." I mean, that's a pretty heavy statement. So can you expand on that? I mean, as best you can in this time.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, let's go back to Naismith first, right? The reason he invents basketball is he's trying to teach decorum and gentlemanliness to unruly college men at Springfield College, okay? And that ethic lasted in basketball for an awful long time. The idea that there are certain ways that you are supposed to carry yourself on the court and certain things you aren't supposed to do. And dunking was regarded as showy as ostentatious, as not being real basketball. It's funny being here in the Philadelphia area where we're having all these discussions and debates and controversies surrounding the Tush Push in the NFL.
Yeah, I saw that
And
this morning on the news.
Yeah, and one of the primary arguments against it is that, well, quote unquote, it's not football.
Right.
Well, people felt exactly the same way about the slam dunk.
Yeah.
In the 40s and into the 50s. But as more and more black players kind of bubble up to the highest levels of the sport, from the playgrounds in the cities of America, they're bringing their culture to the sport, and it is becoming more mainstream. It is growing in popularity, and come the 1960s and 70s, you can't separate, to me, what's happening in basketball from what's happening in America. It's no coincidence that the dunk gets banned in college and high school ball by the quote unquote, not quote unquote, this is actually what it was called, the National Basketball Committee. We actually had such a thing in this country, which oversaw all of amateur basketball in the United States. It's banned in 1967.
Well, let me guess. Okay. It's a bunch of white guys, right?
A bunch of white guys in control of the sport.
Exactly.
This is, it's a year after, less than a year really, after Texas Western beats Kentucky in the NCAA championship game. Texas Western, of course, the first team to win a national championship, starting 5 black players. Kentucky, coached by Adolph Rupp, the most powerful person in college basketball, had not recruited a black player to that point to Kentucky in his life. His entire team was white then. Pat Riley, a friend of yours on that team.
There, yeah, right.
Yeah, probably the best player on that team, on the Mighty Mites of Kentucky.
Right.
And not only does Kentucky lose to Texas Western, but the turning point early in the game is David Lattin, the Texas Western's biggest, strongest player on the inside, is told by Don Haskins, the coach, the first opportunity you have, you are to dunk the ball in the face of whatever Kentucky player is guarding you. We want to intimidate these guys. And it worked. Texas Western took the lead early in the game and never gave it up.
Right.
So you have that. And then you think about what's going on in America. You have the civil rights movement, MLK, Malcolm X, the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act, all of this this righteous upheaval that's going on in the country. And I think the dunk kind of symbolically and tangibly acts as an emblem of black men throughout America asserting themselves, asserting their independence and their own form of power. This is what we can do. This is a way for us to be our own men, to be our own people. Yeah, we're fighting for equality off the court, but on the court, we are your equals, we are your superiors. And of course, I'm leaving out the fact that, in 1966, Lou Alcindor, is a sophomore at UCLA. He's playing on the varsity team for the first time. It's the one season that he plays for the Bruins where dunking is legal in college basketball, and he has statistically his best season for the Bruins. So that's a huge excuse, I guess you'd say, for why the dunk gets banned. We got to stop this Alcindor guy, otherwise he's just going to dominate the sport. And of course, he dominates the sport anyway for the next 2 years because he's just that good.
And he figured out how to, I guess, make his game more deadly with the skyhook, right? Which he could shoot from different places.
He had already learned the skyhook in high school, but he refines it. And the funny thing about Kareem, and you know him, you've watched him longer than I have, Andy, and you can correct me if I'm wrong about this. This has always been just my impression. He's one of the few players, to me, who becomes less graceful for dunking the ball.
True. Very awkward. Absolutely. 100%. I mean, I get that same feeling from Wemby, who's like 9 feet tall, but his dunks are not graceful. They're like gawky, like he just looks like, it's
right.
Not,
both Wembanyama and Kareem were so graceful on the court.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I mean, the skyhook is just beautiful to watch.
No, the sky.
And Wembanyama is, so graceful on the court, except when he's just reaching up and dunking the ball.
No, it's true. You spend a lot of time talking about Kareem as Lou Alcindor and then as Kareem. I love the story that you talk about with the young Dr. J, before he was Dr. J, he was Julius Erving, and meeting up in Reese Park which is where I used to go as a kid every summer, like almost every weekend to Reese Park. So, that was great. David Thompson, the great David Thompson, was robbed, really. His entire college career, could not dunk in college. I mean, it's just insane, right? And then you quote John Wooden as himself, the legend, the man, saying that he never liked the dunk.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
If that's the ultimate irony of this,
Right.
right? If Wooden had said one thing about, hey, this is dumb, we should allow dunking,
Yeah.
they probably would have overturned the ban quicker than they did.
Yeah.
But he never said that.
That's crazy.
And here you have Alcindor on his team, the most dominant player.
Yeah.
It's insane to me. And you're right about David Thompson.
Yeah.
Thompson dunked once in his entire college career at NC State.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're talking about a guy who to this day is regarded as the greatest player in ACC history, right? Like, NC State goes undefeated one year with him and can't be in the NCAA tournament because they're on probation.
Mm-hmm.
They beat UCLA and win the national championship in '74. Thompson is just absolutely electric.
Mm-hmm.
And he dunks once for the final basket of his career at NC State. And of course, it doesn't count because the dunk is banned, but he does it anyway, just to show everyone what might have been.
That's so crazy. Well, I want to talk about Dr. J, who's near and dear to my heart. I'm a UMass guy. I don't know if you knew that, but I'm a Minuteman.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah,
okay.
I went to UMass in 75 to 78. He still cast a long shadow, in the old gym that didn't have any heat. And the fact that he chose to go to UMass and all that was pretty amazing. But and there's a lot of history about Dr. J in the book, which people really need to read about, which I didn't know. But you had a great quote. You said Irving's iterations of the dunk had elevated basketball from a minor pastime in this country into a multi-billion-dollar global industry. So you're crediting the dunk. You're crediting this one player, basically, with taking the NBA to heights it never even knew was possible. And, I was there, obviously, in '84 at the first NBA dunk contest. It was great, incredible to read about the 76 ABA, the final ABA dunk contest, which I had no idea about. And I'd love to talk a little bit about that 84 contest. But just, about Dr. J, and the other thing, the other nugget is that Magic and Bird didn't change the NBA. Julius did. So
just ask Julius.
Yeah, I've heard him say that before, and that's okay. Magic and Bird, they came along at the right time. Obviously, there's a lot there as well. It's a whole nother book, of course. But what's your take on Dr. J? As a person, I think he's phenomenal. I think he's not credited with being as transformative. You call him a transformative figure, as he was, right?
Yeah, that was something that was one of my goals in the book, Andy, was to kind of restore Julius to what I think his proper place in kind of the hierarchy of the sport is. I don't know how much time you spend watching these debate shows that are on ESPN and Fox Sports during the day. They're a bit of a guilty pleasure of mine. It's one of the, I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse of working from home so much.
Right.
But often they'll debate who's the best NBA player of all time or who's your top 10.
Yeah.
And, you hear the same names over again. You hear Michael, you hear LeBron, Magic, Bird, Russell, Wilt, et cetera, et cetera. Kobe is thrown in there from time to time, maybe Tim Duncan. But Julius is rarely mentioned. And I think that's for a couple of reasons. One is that he split his time between the ABA and the NBA so that people don't look at the totality of his professional career. And if you do, then you're talking about someone who ought to be in that discussion because he won multiple championships in the ABA. He, of course, won with the Sixers. He was a multiple-time MVP, scored more than 30,000 points. If you combine his careers from the ABA and the NBA, you have a top 10 player, I think, of all time.
Of course.
But more than that, Julius to me is transformational because he's really the figure, even before Michael, and maybe to a certain degree more than Michael, who marries the street aspects of basketball and the mainstream of American culture. People can look at Julius Erving playing with the Sixers in his early years. And even those chosen few, someone like you who was familiar with him at UMass, or people who followed him while he was in the ABA, at a time when the ABA doesn't have a national television contract, even though Julius is playing, in the latter half of his ABA career for the New York Nets, you really have to know and follow the Nets closely and go to one of their games to be familiar with what Julius was really doing. The analogy I've used since the book came out is like, if you were a Nets fan in the early 1970s, saying you had seen Julius Erving play was akin to telling someone, hey, I went on vacation with my wife to Scotland, and we were standing by the water's edge of this lake, and a sea serpent came out of the water. You should have seen it.
Yeah, yeah.
There was this element of mystery and magic to Julius.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely.
But so you have that, and then you have a guy who, as you hinted at, talking about him personally, is so intelligent, so able to communicate to the broader masses when he speaks to sports writers or broadcasters. And he is such a good teammate, and his teams are all so good. They're either winning championships or contending for championships, that he's really the proof on a broad scale that you can be an individually centered player, flashy, stylistic, going above the rim, throwing down a reverse dunk, taking off from the foul line, doing all these individualized, stylized things that once were poo-pooed in the sport, and still be a great teammate, still be a winner, still be doing everything you're quote unquote supposed to be doing as a basketball player.
Yeah.
And I think without Julius, that transition doesn't happen when it does. It takes longer for mainstream culture to accept the cool factor that so many black players were bringing to basketball.
Right, right. Yeah, it was less a rebellion at that point and just became an incredibly beautiful part of the game.
Right.
I mean, you go as far, Mike, as saying that, quote, what finally convinced the NBA to merge was a chance to get Julius in the league. I mean, one guy, 4 teams get, I guess, absorbed or merged into the NBA, and Julius's Nets are one of them. And all of a sudden, he's in the NBA, right? And then we fast forward to the 84 dunk contest, right? So that was 1976, I guess, 76, 77 season. We get to the 84 dunk contest, and the NBA is trying to replicate what the ABA did, right? And my good friend, probably your friend as well, Rick Welts, David Stern, Russ Granick, all those guys put this weekend together, which All-Star was never a weekend, it was a game on a Sunday. But they put a weekend together with the slam dunk contest really being the centerpiece. I mean, the game was great, but like the dunk contest became really the reason you went to All-Star Weekend. I hate to say it if anyone from the NBA is listening, but it's true. And what I didn't know, Mike, and this is another one of those great nuggets. I had no idea that when the leagues merged, right, that the NBA had like a league-wide dunk contest that was going on, like during the season. I had never heard that. That's
so
incredible.
let's set this up, Andy, okay?
Yeah.
So the ABA is dying in the mid-1970s. They just don't have enough money. Too many of their teams are in small markets. So in an attempt to kind of rejuvenate the league, they hold their own dunk contest in 1976. And it basically comes down to Julius and David Thompson, and it's a smash. It can't save the league, but Julius, takes off from near the foul line. In the days thereafter, their interview show, they're on Good Morning America, and Julius is all over the place, finally, for really the first time. So the other aspect you have to think about at this time is that in the mid-1970s into the late 1970s, college basketball was more popular in America than the NBA was.
Wow.
Because of the UCLA dynasty, because players were staying 3 and 4 years. And so you have this battle between NBC, which has all the college basketball television rights, and CBS, which has all the NBA TV rights. So to try to gin up ratings, CBS and the NBA kind of collaborate on some measures to try to get more people interested in NBA basketball. And one of the things they decide to do is a dunk contest. They're going to rip off the ABA. The only problem is they decide they're going to like build it over the course of the season. They're going to have like a tournament where they pick certain players from teams around the league, and they're going to have them face off at various points during the year, all building to halftime of Game 6 of the 1977 NBA Finals between the Sixers and the Portland Trailblazers.
I mean, 45 years with the league. How did I not know that story? That's crazy. That's an incredible story. Yeah.
It gets even more incredible.
Yeah.
Because Julius doesn't take part in it. He wants to get paid to take part in it, and he's not going to get paid.
Yeah.
So he says, forget it. Thompson actually gets beaten. He's with the Denver Nuggets by now. He gets beaten in one of the contests. And it comes down to the guy who ends up winning is a pretty well-known player from the 70s named Darnell Hillman, who had spent his entire career both in the ABA and the NBA with the Indiana Pacers, really good player. But here's the thing, Andy, and this is so hilarious to me. A few weeks before the contest, Hillman gets traded from the Pacers to the Nets. He doesn't want to go to the Nets. And he actually can exercise the clause in his contract that says he doesn't have to play for the Nets if he doesn't want to. So he goes home to Indiana, even though he's already qualified to be in the championship round of the dunk contest. So he's working out at a small college in Indianapolis while the rest of the season is going on. He's not playing for any team in the league. In fact, he's playing softball for a team that is sponsored by a local liquor store.
Oh boy.
So by the time the dunk contest rolls around, halftime of Game 6 of the NBA Finals, he comes out to take on Larry McCray, I think, McNeil.
Yeah, Larry McNeil, right, in the book.
Yeah, and Darnell Hillman isn't wearing his Pacers jersey. He isn't wearing a Nets jersey. He's wearing a T-shirt for the liquor store that he played softball for. It says Bottle Shop, SHOPPE, across the front of his shirt. I mean, you're talking about a real honky-tonk event here.
Sure.
And Hillman wins. Everybody watches it. The whole thing is televised.
Yeah.
But it's kind of made fun of. You know, the Game 6 is on TV, and Brent Musburger, who's calling the game for CBS, is basically telling the viewing audience, hey, this isn't a real dunk contest because Julius Erving isn't taking part in it.
Wow.
You know, and it's funny to think about how we got from that to where we got to with 84 and then later 88, you know, kind of the real peak of the contest.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't want to jump ahead too much, but yeah, I mean, we're in 84, incredible dunk contest. You know, I got Larry Nance winning that contest, which was amazing. Great picture. I have a funny story that Larry Nance Jr. gets drafted by the Lakers, and got to know him. Really nice guy. I don't know if you know him, but he's just a down-to-earth guy. And one day he had this ridiculous dunk early in his rookie season, and I put it side by side with his dad's dunk. It was a very similar dunk, and he looks at it. He goes, "Yeah, you know that one of my dad. We had that hanging in the house all the time growing up." He says, "How'd you get that?" I said, "Well, I took it." And he looks at me. He goes, "How the F old are you, man?" I'm like, well, old enough to be around when your dad did that, buddy, but it's kind of funny.
Oh man, that's like wonderful and sobering all at the same time.
It was just hilarious. We still joke about it. So fast forward, my friend, because I don't want to keep you too long, but I got so much more to ask you. I'm in 88, I'm in Dallas, right? And they announced the dunk participants, and this really short dude comes out, right? Spud Webb. I'm thinking this is going to be like a joke. I mean, I'm thinking Dominique, his teammate, is going to literally pick him up, and they're going to, like a little kid. I mean, I think I maybe saw Spud Webb play once that whole year. Maybe I hadn't seen him at all. I just thought it was like a novelty. And I'll never forget it, Mike, when he went up, and no one that I knew had ever seen this guy dunk, ever, right? And I remember he went up for that dunk. You know, I get one shot, right? So I'm trying to time it. I don't know what I thought. He was going to like bank it in or something. I like a layup. And he went up and he went up and he kept going. And for some unknown reason, I waited until he was at the apex and dunked it. And I don't know if you probably weren't there. You were too young. But literally it was like a millisecond of silence in the arena. Like people could not believe, and then the place erupted, right? And he just like, yeah, I do it all the time. You know, it was like unbelievable. And he did it again, and he did it again. It was truly insane. And in my NBA life, it's literally one of the top 5 moments of my career when that happened.
Ah, that's really cool. Yeah, I mean, Dominique wins in '85.
Yeah.
Spud wins in '86 in the scene you just described in Dallas and becomes a celebrity.
Yeah.
I mean,
did I say 86 or 88? I think I said 88.
You said 88, but that's okay. Yeah,
86.
he won in '86.
Right, 86.
And becomes a celebrity. He's on the Tonight Show.
Yeah.
You know, he had stepped into the Atlanta Hawks starting lineup because Doc Rivers had gotten injured and he had played really well.
Right.
But as you said, nobody knew he could dunk.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody knew that he had spent his childhood like teaching himself how to dunk because where he grew up, you know, in Dallas, if you couldn't dunk, you might as well not bother stepping onto the court.
Right.
And then of course all that builds to '88 where the contest is at Chicago Stadium.
Mm-hmm.
Michael is there and healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Dominique is there and healthy. Spud is there and kind of healthy, but you also have Clyde Drexler and Jerome Kersey and Greg Cadillac Anderson. Right. I mean, this is when the contest really was drawing the major star power from the league itself. Right. You know, it's a far cry from what it is now.
Yeah, Michael's at home and he's Michael.
Exactly.
At that point. So
Exactly. Yeah. And that to me is the pinnacle of the dunk contest and really the dunk's influence on the sport. When you have that many stars and you have Michael Jordan and Dominique Wilkins in the finals treating the dunk contest like it's game 7 of a playoff series. Like their careers are going to be defined by who wins this. You know, you're not going to have that anymore these days. You're just not.
No, it's crazy. First of all, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I read in your book that Michael did the takeoff from the free throw line dunk twice. He hit the brim on one of them.
He missed the first one.
I didn't even remember that.
He missed the first one.
I didn't even remember that. And you know what, Mike? As we're talking about it, you know, you talk about all that drama that happened with Walter Yost and Michael, and I'm not going to talk about that because it's in the book, and I couldn't do it justice. But the fact that Walter kind of knew which direction, well, he did know which direction Michael was going. It produced probably the most iconic dunk photo in the history of dunk photos, which, you know, hangs on my wall. But I also got that dunk from the side, and I don't remember if I was underneath where my usual position is, and then he clanked the first one, and then I scurried and moved to the side. I don't remember. But the fact that, I don't know, something told me shoot this from the sideline instead of the baseline and shoot it loose. I probably moved because I wouldn't have known to shoot this horizontally. And, you know, I have that shot in midair. And what's really funny about that picture, a little side note, is that all the people in the background, like kneeling down on the sideline in front of the bench, in front of the scorer's table, every one of those people became like an NBA entertainment vice president. They're all my friends. I love them to death. It's just funny looking at it. Anyway, I think you coined the phrase in the book, is that when jumping became flying, right? I mean, he literally flew to the rim. Not to mention that Dr. J had done it already, you know.
Yes,
he knew
Dr. J had done it. Dr. J was there at the '88 contest and kind of gave Michael a nod of permission to be able to do the takeoff from the foul line dunk.
Amazing.
And of course, he's in front of the home crowd.
Yeah.
At old Chicago Stadium. And, you know, in all fairness to Michael, who's the greatest of all time, Dominique should have won that contest.
Oh, yeah.
He was better dunk for dunk, pound for pound, including one where he takes off from 2 feet, which anyone who dunks will tell you is harder to do than it is to take off from 1 foot. So, and I spoke to Dominique for the book, and he mentioned that as well. That, you know, I knew I wasn't going to win, but I had to give it everything I had.
No, he didn't. It was truly a tremendous competition. You know, then we see the decline of the dunk contest, and I want to know your take on it. But you know, all of a sudden, we're not seeing the big names, the big dunkers. I mean, you bring up Ja Morant very early in the book, and you know, fast forward to today, like to have Ja in the dunk contest, forget about it, right? I mean, so funny. I reached out to my friend Joe Murphy, who's been the longtime Memphis team photographer, and I was going to shoot John his rookie season coming into LA, first time. And I said, Joe, because we get one shot, and I said,
Right.
Joe, this kid goes up to dunk, like, when's the right time to shoot? He said, Andy, all I can tell you is that just shoot it loose because you're going to chop his arm off because the kid is going to go so far above the rim, like to the top of the box. And I did. I cut his hand off because he just kept going. Anyway, I digress. But what happened, Mike? I mean, like, why did it suddenly it seemed like overnight from one year to the next, like the big guys are no longer competing. What happened?
I mean, I think a few things happened. Primarily, it became harder to impress everyone in the aftermath of Michael and Dr. J and Dominique and maybe even Vince Carter, right? Gimmicks start to appear in the contest. Blake Griffin's going to jump over a car and Dwight Howard's going to wear a Superman cape.
Yeah.
And it becomes a little cheesy and a little, this is not what we're here to do. We're here to have a good time All-Star weekend. Maybe we'll win the All-Star game, but it's really more of a big party. And, by that time too, the NBA has now achieved multi-billion-dollar status as an entertainment organization in the country. So there wasn't a sense among the players themselves that this is something we need to do to grow the game. I think Michael and certainly Julius felt that way. Like we've got to increase the popularity of the sport.
Yeah.
And I think in recent years, the fact that the league keeps bringing McClung back.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah. So I
not
think
even an NBA player.
Exactly. 3
Right?
years in a row that he's been in the G League. He signs with a team, a couple of days before the contest, competes in the contest, and then goes back to the G League.
Yeah.
I think there are a couple things at work there. Number one, for obvious reasons, McClung cuts against every stereotype of a guy who's going to win the dunk contest. He's 6'2" and white. Right. So, you're going to, the hope is, I would imagine, they're going to draw in more casual fans. People were like, I want to see this little white dude beat all these other guys in the dunk contest.
Exactly.
But I think at a deeper level, Andy, part of the reason that we want to see McClung in the dunk contest is because when we watch him dunk, it restores the sense of wonder that we used to have when Michael and Julius and Dominique and David Thompson were flying through the air, when this was all kind of new. We expect it now. The players in the league now are so big and so fast and so strong and can fly so high and do so many amazing things. Never mind that so many of them are now just shooting three-pointers. The efficiency has kind of taken over, that I think some of the wonder in the sport has been lost. It doesn't mean that they aren't great players. It doesn't mean that they don't do things that are breathtaking. It just means that on the whole, we've lost more of that feeling compared to when we once had it. And a guy like McClung in the dunk contest restores that sense of, I can't believe he's doing this.
Yeah. I couldn't believe it either. I watched it this year, his third one in a row. And the dunks this kid was pulling out was just unbelievable to me. I mean, I'd seen them all before, and couldn't even imagine them doing that. But this was just blew my mind, quite frankly.
Yeah, and take a guy like the young player you mentioned earlier, Victor Wembanyama. Okay, when Victor Wembanyama dunks, he barely has to jump.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it doesn't make him a worse athlete. He's an incredible athlete.
Yeah.
I mean, I hope he gets back to full health and is able to have a long career.
Yeah.
Because he's wonderful to watch and he's so gifted. But it's not breathtaking to see him dunk the ball.
No.
It just isn't, because he's so tall and so fast and can jump so high.
And let's not forget, because I was there, his first points as an NBA player was a three-pointer. This guy's 7'5" and he's shooting a three-pointer. So
that gets to the other part of the equation here.
Yeah.
When Wembanyama stopped playing for the Spurs this year because of his heart condition or blood, I forget exactly what it was. I want to make sure I get that right.
Yeah.
Yes, he was tied for second in the league in most three-pointers made from beyond 23 feet, I think. So think about that. You have a guy who's between 7'3" and 7'5". Yeah. Bombing away from the outside like he's Steph Curry.
Yeah. I mean,
That's
it
where we're
reminds
at
me
in this sport.
It reminds me a little bit of Manute Bol, but Manute, Don Nelson just kind of threw that in there as, I don't know, just entertainment value. But Manute, he wasn't shy shooting that three-pointer.
That's right.
And,
I remember when he was with the Sixers, he would shoot it.
It's amazing. And now, as you say, the game's become quote unquote perimeter based. It is. I mean, it's an outside game now. I don't know how many three-pointers.
Some of the spontaneity and improvisational nature of the sport has been lost. You look at all those shot charts that we see from, where on the court are most shots taken from in an NBA game.
Yeah.
They're all right around the rim and they're all at the 3-point line. There's no intermediate game. That idea of Kobe or Allen Iverson shaking somebody on the perimeter with an incredible move and making a shot from 15 to 20 feet that is really difficult, has a high degree of difficulty, but is breathtaking when you see them do it. That's kind of been siphoned away from the sport as well. And I think some of those spectacular dunks are part of it too.
Yeah. Let's not forget, though, that the term posterize, which is photography based, is based on somebody completely abusing another guy on a dunk, not shooting a three, with all respect to Steph, and I love him to death. But, if one dude's dunking over another guy, it's a poster. And
yes,
and that was coined during my time shooting. I mean, literally posterizing a guy, putting him on a poster.
See, I didn't want to blame you in the book for the decline of the dunk, Andy, but now I'm rethinking this.
You could.
But I think that's honestly a factor too.
Yeah.
I think, with the rise of social media, Andrew Bogut, the longtime center in the league, has spoken about this.
Yeah.
About guys don't want to go up and try to block a dunk.
Right.
And make a more exciting play, a more daring play to try to block someone from dunking because they don't want to be posterized.
Yeah.
They don't want to be made fun of on social media.
Yeah.
You want to get out of the way
True.
rather than be there having somebody, jumping over you to dunk.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
I think that's a factor too.
Yeah, for sure. Just a couple of things real quick, and I don't want to short shrift the women, okay, because you spend some time in the book talking about the women and the history of dunking. I have a thought, okay, that when the WNBA came into existence, they changed a lot of things about the men's game, right? They brought in the 3-point line a little closer. The ball is smaller. The clock is shorter. It's 10-minute quarters, right? Why didn't they just lower their rim 6 inches? I mean, seriously, I know, look, the purity of the game, all that stuff, but dunking being what it was, even then, 97, that was the heyday, right? I don't know. I just think that it could have brought in more fans. It could have made the game a little more exciting. We didn't have Brittany Griner then.
Right.
And, Lisa Leslie was the first one I was aware of that dunked in an WNBA game. Anyway, did you ever think about that as an option for the WNBA?
I didn't really. I was more concerned in that chapter about making sure those players who had dunked on the 10-foot rim were kind of got their due, because that to me was the interesting dynamic as I was writing the book, was that women's basketball now is more popular than it has ever been. Yet at the same time, the dunk has nothing to do with that popularity.
Nothing
at all.
No, it's
all about the 3-pointer. It's all about the dynamics at the college level of the sport, where stars are able to stay for 3 or 4 years and leverage their stability of their careers in college to become more popular, grow their profile on social media. And of course, the sport has improved immensely over time. But I wanted to kind of focus on, hey, don't forget about Charlotte Smith and Sylvia Crawley and Georgianne Wells, because they were true pioneers in this sport. And so you raise a great point. Maybe they should have lowered the rim. Maybe it wasn't cost effective to do it. Maybe they I don't know. I don't know what the explanation.
Well, maybe it's just because they did change some of the stuff. I mean, granted, those 3 things I mentioned are minor compared to lowering the rim, which was sacrosanct. But and then in your book you talk about actually raising the rim to 12 feet. That's a whole other conversation. So the last thing I want to mention, Mike, is I have a solution to the dunk contest, right? And I've never said it publicly on my podcast, and you're the perfect person to say it to. So here's my idea: that you get the top guys from today. I mean, you get your John Morants and who else is a great dunker today? I can't even think.
Anthony Edwards.
Anthony Edwards, of course, I can forget him. 6 guys, And out of a hat, they have to pick from, let's say, a dozen of the most iconic dunks in dunk contest history, right? So Vince's through the legs, Dominique's 2 balls, Michael taking off from the free throw line, D. Brown with the thing, the whole thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have to pick it, and then they have to learn it, and then they perform it at the dunk contest, and the guy who did it originally has to judge it. How about that idea?
I love it. I love this idea.
Yeah.
Here's where I'm going to play devil's advocate.
Right.
Okay. I love everything about this idea.
Mm-hmm.
My only concern is, gosh, there's this incredible debate going on now within the sport about how good today's players are relative to players from yesteryear, right? This is the whole, the guys in the 50s and 60s were plumbers and all this stuff.
Right, but this helps bridge that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
If the players of today would be willing to do it, I think it's an awesome idea.
I mean, can you imagine like Dominique, Michael, Julius,
David Thompson,
Vince,
Spud Webb, whoever, bring them back. Yeah.
Unbelievable. I just think it'd be fun. I actually suggested it to Adam Silver, and he goes, "I'll put it under consideration."
I think you absolutely have something there, because it's something that the NBA should do anyway. It's one of the things that, to be very frank, the other sports leagues do better than the NBA, which is embrace their history. When you follow football or baseball or even hockey, you are always aware that there's this continuum of the great players of the past to the great players of the present and to the players who will be great in the future. And I think the NBA could use a little bit more emphasis on that.
Well, look, I'll keep putting it out there. Now it's out there, and whoever's listening from the NBA office, you heard it here first on the Legends of Sport podcast with my great friend, Mike Sielski. Hey, Mike, thanks so much, man. I mean, we could go on and on, man. This book was phenomenal. The way I do it is I read the book first, then I go back and I highlight stuff. So there's the entire book is highlighted with all this stuff from you. And it was
That's really cool.
Really a pleasure, man. I hope we get to do another panel together at some point. That was so much fun when we did that in Kobe's gym where he honed his skills. I mean, unbelievable experience for me. And, if you're on the West Coast, let's do a book event. We'll sit down, we'll have a chat, when the public can be invited and stuff.
I'm coming out in May, actually, to do some research for my next book, which I'm going to pub real quickly. I'm working on a book about the making of the movie Rocky.
Wow.
So I have to come out to California in May. So I'll give you the dates that I'm going to be out there, and I would love to do an event like that. Andy, I'm so grateful for you having me on the pod, for your friendship, all of it. I can't thank you enough.
Mike, we met because of the Mamba, because of Kobe. That's how you and I met, and I feel like his spirit continues to just make put people in front of me that I just should meet and know, and I'm glad we've become friends through him. And let's do it offline. We'll talk about that because I have a few ideas of where we could do something. Okay,
sounds great.
All right, my friend, take care. Good to see
you. All right, thanks, Andy.
And listen, they got to keep the tush push. And by the way, why doesn't any other team do that? I don't understand why it's Philadelphia.
They can't do it as well. They don't have a quarterback who squats 600 pounds and an offensive line that's the best in the league.
Well, it's like when the Fridge used to carry the ball, remember?
Yeah.
With the old Bears. I mean, nobody had a guy that big either. But anyway, it's a whole other conversation. Anyway, Mike, good to see you, buddy. Take care. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy.
Okay. Well, folks, I told you that was going to be a great conversation. Thanks to Mike for writing this terrific book and for a great interview. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I did. Thanks, folks, for tuning into this episode and for continuing to support the Legends of Sport podcast presented by Fujifilm. Please follow them on Instagram at FujifilmX_US. That's at FujifilmX_US. Please tell all your friends to subscribe to our YouTube channel at Legends of Sport and to our Instagram at Legends of Sport. And my photography can be found on Instagram at ADB Photo Inc. Thanks as always to our producer Carlin Barker and our editors Sean Gosser and Addison Shao. Thanks again, everybody, for tuning into this episode. Of course, we'll be back next week with another great episode on the Legends of Sport podcast presented by Fujifilm.